Good afternoon.
Good.
Welcome to Faith in the City. It is so good to see you as we continue our programs for the fall. I like to let people know this is the 8th year of Faith in the City. Raise your hand. You're always in. That's right. That's right. It's just remarkable, and we certainly appreciate all the support we've gotten from throughout the community. And it was also great to see so many of you last month when we had our kickoff session with State Superintendent Mo Green. Wasn't that wonderful? I don't think we've ever had anybody standing up and chanting so loudly in our sanctuary. We won't ask you to do that again today, but I hope you remember those words about being a champion for public education. It was really a wonderful turnout and a wonderful expression of support for our public schools. And we plan to continue focusing on the important role of public education throughout the year. And we hope that you can help us shape those programs. So we like to hear from you. We like to get your thoughts and ideas about speakers and so on. And frankly, we all know that supporting our public schools is no more important than it is right here in Winston-Salem at this critical time. And that's why we're glad to have a panel today. Leaders in this vital All In for Our Schools initiative, which is a collaborative effort to provide resources and support as we weather the financial crisis in our schools. In addition to a very successful fundraising effort, which they will update us on today, the initiative is designed to build long-term advocacy for our schools. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on individual introductions today because these are probably familiar faces for many of you in the audience and familiar faces and organizations. And then as they talk about their specific roles in the initiative, they're going to tell you a little bit more about how they're involved in that. But just briefly, we're glad to welcome Marnie Eisner, who is Executive Director of the Education Foundation for Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And that organization, which she'll tell you a little bit more about, that helps to secure financial support and resources to enhance learning and achievement among our students. Marnie has a long, extensive career working on child advocacy, most recently here at Cross-Nor as Director of the Center for Trauma Resilient Communities. Did I get that right? Okay, good. Next is Elaine Summerfield, Vice President for Community Impact at the Winston-Salem Foundation. He's been with the foundation since 2023 and came here after a long career and varied career in Richmond, where she was involved in foundation work, advocacy work, all of that kind of centered around children and children's achievement and empowerment. And then Jamie Southern, who's no stranger here for us at Knollwood, but also throughout the community as Executive Director of Bookmarks, a nonprofit bookstore that we all know and love. And the vital role, we appreciate the vital role that Bookmarks plays in getting books in the hands of children and in our classrooms. So we've asked them to talk about their role in the initiative, as I mentioned, and then Dean Clifford is going to walk them through some questions that we've asked them to consider and talk with us about today. And we hope that you can engage. We'll have time for you to engage in some additional Q&A as well. And before I turn it over to them, just a reminder, again, cookies and drinks are going fast, so if you want to get some, get up and go get them, help yourself. And then, as I said earlier, before you leave today, if you have not been on our mailing list to get our monthly reminders and about Faith in the City, please leave your name and email out there if you would like to do so. And we also have a Facebook group that we share relevant information about from time to time. So now I'm just going to call on the members of our panel, and we have to pass this mic along without clicking on it. So tell me who gets first.
Should I announce numbers first? Because I feel really good, honestly, about where we are almost, what is it, it's November. So this started back in July, August. What's that, about 3 months? And just FYI, 3 months ago, most people wouldn't take my meetings, you know, and I get it. Everyone was in their feelings. This has been really challenging. But to give you an update, currently the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools Student Success Fund is at $640,000 and a little change of their $1.5 million goal. The Education Foundation Classroom Supplies Fund is at 1.12 million of their $1.4 million goal. Bookmarks, y'all need to give more to Bookmarks because I love what they're doing, giving books to all the kids. Bookmarks right now is working to get Every Shelf, Every Student book drive, and I'm glad that Jamie's here because she'll explain more exactly what that means. There are a lot of books not available right now in our schools. They're at 7,000 and change, but they only need to get to 85,000. So I know we can get there. And then finally, our newest fund, which I'm sure you all read about in the paper over the last few weeks, is the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Futures Fund, which is working towards debt reduction, is at $4.1 million. We are so fortunate to have such an incredibly generous community here in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. I mean, look, we can all be honest about the fact that raising money to pay off someone's credit card debt is never fun, okay? However, our students and our teachers are really the most important in all of this, and this happened through no fault of theirs, and we really need to mitigate the impact it has on them. So I guess I'll just briefly introduce myself. I am Marnie Eisner, and I'm the Executive Director of the Education Foundation. I'm sorry, several of you are thinking, we have an Education Foundation? Yes, I completely understand that. So it started a little over 2.5 years ago, and it was seeded with a little bit of money, but for about 2 years, it didn't have a staff and had a volunteer board. And they just worked on distributing some small teacher grants, you know, anywhere from 15 to 20 grants a year at about $1,000. About a year ago, I met with Tricia McManus and Deanna Kaplan and just said, you know, I really think it could be doing so much more for our community. Just my own background, my children graduated from Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, 2 from Reynolds and 1 from Atkins. Love those schools. My mom was a speech therapist in a Title I district in New Jersey. So I've grown up around my dinner table with conversations about public schools really my whole life. And I went to public school as well. And so I was so excited about this opportunity. We were kind of just in quiet mode. I took the job months ago, but really the whole thought process was looking at all your blank faces. The community doesn't know about this. It's based on a national model. Local education foundations are operating all across the country in lots of cities and communities, both big and small. We have several in North Carolina, and they work to benefit the entire public school system. So the plan was, let's spend some time talking to community. Let's get buy-in and let's create a shared vision of what this education foundation could look like. Okay, as you all know, the sky fell, like literally, literally. Me and my husband laughs all the time. I have challenges balancing our checkbook, and so I'm thankfully married to a finance guy, so I don't really have to spend too much time worrying about it. I now know more about budgets and numbers and reading budgets and reading audit reports than I ever wanted to know. But the Education Foundation felt that really we were the one organization positioned, even though none of you knew about us, to step up in this crisis and do something to support our schools. And when we initially stepped up, the focus was on supporting our students and teachers right now. And that was why we came forward with the Classroom Supplies Fund, which for those of you who don't know, the reason we're trying to raise the $1.4 million is that's the money that the schools have not received. That's the rest of the supply budget they are owed for this school year. And when we decided to come forward, I'm so thankful for the partnership with the Winston-Salem Foundation because I am a staff of 1. So doing a huge campaign to raise money was going to be really challenging if I had to do this by myself. And so to have their partnership, their support of really managing the fund and the receipt of gifts and all of that has been invaluable. And together we worked and collaborated a whole group of people, some of whom you see here, many of whom you also know. I see Chuck Spong here. So Love Out Loud's around the table. I mean, a lot of organizations that I know have presented to all of you over the years is part of the group that's really thinking about how do we mitigate impact of this crisis. Okay,
All right.
it's your turn.
Hi, sure. All right. Again, my name is Elaine Summerfield, Vice President of Community Impact at the Winston-Salem Foundation. And as Marty mentioned, she was in a position where she didn't have the infrastructure to receive the funds, to send the thank you notes, et cetera, the things that are involved in running a campaign. And the Winston-Salem Foundation, you probably are familiar, we've been around for over 100 years. And one thing we can do is manage funds and send thank you. Winston-Salem Foundation has been supporting our schools and students, since our inception, from our student aid and scholarship program to teacher awards to the many nonprofits we support that are providing enrichment opportunities for our public school students. So we've been involved for a long time. And it was natural that we wanted to step up too. People were calling us and asking, what can I do? What can I do? Can I give money to you, to the foundation, to go to the schools? And, forging a partnership made sense that we could serve as a hub for receipts, for pulling together some materials, helping to assist, again, along with all the partners that have been involved. We established the fund in partnership with Marty and the Education Foundation, school supplies. Well, we also know that the schools have other expenses beyond supplies that are have been cut and are under threat. So we worked with the school system to identify what are some specific expenses, really specific, like give us a line item and what it costs, that we can help raise funds to address. That's really going to make a difference right now in terms of helping students succeed. So we got a list of those opportunities. It includes things like volunteer background checks. The school was going to cease doing that because there wasn't funding at a time when so many people want to volunteer. So we're able to support expenses like that. Additional AP exam costs. Things that really could stand in the way of a student's success. So that's our section of the campaign with the Student Success Fund. I was going to say every Student Success Fund. All right, and then also we continue to hear from the community. That's nice, but long term, what are we going to do about this debt? Like, how are the schools ever going to get out from under it? And initially we thought, well, kind of like Marty said, like people aren't interested in paying for debt. People don't want to do that. Like donors want to support the things that are going to, touch the students. And they do. But thankfully, we also have some really generous people in our community that want to do something about that debt. And having the county step up to say that they would match made a huge difference in galvanizing support up to that 4.1 million that's been raised so far. Every dollar raised is going to help bring down that debt and assist the schools over the long term. So, it's a crisis, absolutely. But it's also been an incredible opportunity for us all to come together. And so, we're really focused on all of the good that's coming out of this situation, and hoping to carry this goodwill forward. So.
Sure. And you might wonder, why is Bookmarks here? Because I'm not a foundation and we don't give people money. We raise money to support our nonprofit mission. But I think the important thing that Bookmarks represents on this panel is really just all of the individual community partners that have been a part of this effort and many other efforts in our community to support our schools. That we do. What is our superpower in the community? What are we already doing with the schools? And maybe now what can we do a little bit more of in this time of crisis? So that was our conversation that we had among our staff is we already give books to schools. We already work with schools in a very close capacity and we have for 20 years. What does it look like if we ask them what are the books that now the libraries don't have money for this year? All those budgets have been cut. Many schools are without a librarian. Several, I think we have 6. Librarians cut 2 from each level of school, and then several more librarians have been cut to half-time positions. So when you lose that advocate in the school for literacy, what's going to be the outcome with that? They don't just check out books. For the folks that are volunteering their time in the libraries where there are no media coordinators anymore, how can we get them the books that they need to help make sure that kids stay interested and excited about reading? That's really what Bookmarks is about, is making sure that we instill that love of reading so that kids can become lifelong learners. In addition to that, my daughter is in 4th grade at Spees Elementary School, and the 3rd through 5th grade ELA textbooks were one of the things that went. And so we have our 2nd book that we're reading now in English class for 4th grade. I just got a message from her teacher last week. Who's going to buy those books for the 23 kids in her class, for every shelf, every student? We know that some schools have really engaged parents and some do not. Some schools have the benefit of having Knollwood involved, like Bolton. Some schools do not. So where are places that we can help alleviate some of that anxiety around where are the books going to come from so our kids can read this year? And how do we prevent more kids from falling behind? Because we know we already have a gap in reading proficiency in this district. So that is our involvement, and that is how Bookmarks specifically got involved.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to really put them on the spot and say, what are you hearing out there? What are the opportunities that maybe we haven't recognized yet? My name is Dean Clifford, and I've had a lot of roles in this community because you can tell by looking at me, I've been around a long time. I won't say just how long. But when I finished college, my first job here in Winston-Salem was to teach high school. Then later, I became an elementary school counselor. Then later, I decided we didn't start soon enough, so I went back for another round of graduate education and worked in the whole early childhood field. And that was a real opportunity to learn a lot, not just about that field, but about the power of collaboration and coalitions working on behalf of systemic change. And that you may remember, if you've been here long enough, in the early days of Smart Start under Governor Hunt's leadership, there was a challenge daily because it was so new and moved so quickly. We submitted a grant without knowing how much we'd get or exactly what we had to do with it, or how quickly we could move and so forth and so on. And so we were told in, I think it was maybe September, that we were going to get a grant and we would have about $8 million a year, and that in 6 weeks we had to submit our plan for how we were going to use that money. So you can imagine with that kind of turnaround, you make mistakes sometimes. Nigel Lawson was one of my board chairs. And one of the things I loved about him was that he would call me every morning, knowing we might have had a problem. And he wouldn't say, what problem do you have for me today? He would say, Dean, what opportunity do you have for me today? I really loved that. And so when this whole crisis began to surface, in our community, my first thought is, what's the opportunity maybe buried in this huge, what seems like an overwhelming crisis and challenge? And about that time, I became familiar with a Bible verse in Isaiah that talked about being given the treasures of darkness. I thought, what an interesting phrase, the idea that darkness includes some kind of treasure. So sitting around the table with some of these people and others, I began to hear those kind of comments. Yes, this is a crisis, but what might come out of it that in the long run will be a real opportunity, an opportunity to raise new support, heartfelt support for public education. Because public education, as all of you in this room know, has been under attack. And with the expansion of vouchers and other programs, and the reduction in per student funding, so that instead of being somewhere in the middle, which North Carolina was maybe a decade ago, we're next to bottom. And so we need to be paying attention to reshaping the narrative about public education and why it's important and all the good that comes out of it. It's so easy to focus on things that didn't go so well, because there are always going to be things that don't go well. So we gave some questions to these people and asked them to think about it. I'm going to throw out one at a time, and whoever wants to take the first stab, and each of you will pass the mic along. So the first thing we asked them was, as you've been raising money, have you been out in the community trying to work on this? What have you been hearing from community members as they either join or not your efforts? Question number one.
Honestly, the last 8 weeks has felt like 8 years. I mean, it's just been such an unbelievable kind of evolution of the conversation. I mean, initially, you all know, and I think, you know, as a community, we've probably gone through the stages of grief with so much anger, resentment, wanting to find someone to blame. It was a real challenge when the Education Foundation Board, and some of you may know Neil Tackleberry is our board chair, and Marilyn Parker is our vice chair, when we made the decision as an organization that we needed to step up and do something. We did not get a lot of positive feedback about that, because it, you know, look, we're all hurt by this situation. But slowly, you know, we started to see things turn around. I will forever be grateful to Mike and Wendy Brenner, because I think their generosity really changed the conversation as the first people to step forward with such largesse, and then to say, Marty, you publicly tell everyone we've done this because we really want to challenge the community to step up. I think people really started to think about how is this impacting our students, our educators, you know, in particular, our educators who've been under attack. You know, in some instances, you can't look at it in a vacuum. It's sort of been a perfect storm of what's been building in our state, with a lot of, I think, anti-public school sentiment, unfortunately, from our legislators. But then as the conversations continued, I was thankful to hear many people, and I had several meetings with Don Flo about this, but he just kept insisting, you know, we have to get into the debt reduction. We have to get into the debt reduction, because no matter what you're able to do, if we don't figure that piece out, we are always going to be hamstrung for the next however many years it takes. Like, that's going to hang over us as a dark cloud and impact our ability to support our students. So you know, he always says it was a community effort, but he really behind the scenes started pounding the pavement on that as well. But the other thing I've heard is, now that I think everyone has embraced sort of the totality of this fundraising effort, is I've now heard several donors come and talk to me and say they're so impressed with Caddy Moore. I don't know how many of you have seen her speak. I'm such a fan of hers, and I've had the opportunity to meet Dr. Phipps, and I'm so excited about what he brings to our community. But I've had several people now say to me, her knowledge of her financial crisis, which it's like master class if you haven't seen her speak, we now want someone to come in and give that presentation about how we get to better academic and educational outcomes. And I think of, you know, Rahm Emanuel, anybody familiar with him? I'm a political junkie, kind of fan of his, and I have 2 kids in Chicago right now, which is his home base. But, you know, he always says, never waste a crisis. And my communications team, I don't think any of them are here, but I have an amazing group of communications people volunteering all their time. They help create the all-in for our schools, all the language you see around it, and the website, and all of this stuff has just come together with their help. But they say that, you know, the same thing, like, this is an opportunity to reevaluate how we're doing things. What can we do better? How can we think outside the box? I mean, I think some of you in this room have sent me articles about the New Orleans school system after Katrina. That seems to be a popular thing that keeps getting sent to me. So I don't know where the Education Foundation lands after this moment. And we will be probably talking to a lot of you in this room because we will finally get to our strategic planning at that point. But I think that for something that's been so devastating, I'm at a moment where I'm so hopeful as well.
Yeah, I share your hopefulness and optimism for sure. Part of what Marty was sharing was that transition that we all went through, like being angry and resentful, and then pivoting to, okay, what are we going to do about it? How can we solve this crisis? And I think part of what helped people get around that corner and think about how to contribute and how to get involved was due to the leadership at the school system. If we had different type of leadership that was holding things close to the vest, I don't think we'd be in this position now. We really benefited from having an interim who just daylighted all of the issues so that we're all aware and we can ensure that this isn't going to happen again, right? Because initially the question was, how did we get here? Now we are thinking, let's make sure it never happens again. And I don't think it can. I think that's one of the positive things that came out of this opportunity. Some people call it, in situations like this, an opportunist stake. But no, it's we are all going to be paying attention, right? We're all going to be taking a look at what is in this budget, what is the board voting. I feel like there has been an elevated, not just interest in the school system, but an elevated sense that we all can hold them accountable, right? We are all responsible for that. So I think that's another positive aspect of this crisis. And, when it comes to the foundation's role, we are going to continue to receive the funds, share with the school system and the foundation. And we'll see what comes next with All In for Our Schools. I think that that's still to be determined, but we do know that we have now a new list of individuals who, through their donations to the funds, have said we are here for public schools. So we have a great starting point for who we can rally, who we can pull to the table for our next steps. I do want to share too that with that debt fund that's now over $4 million, the gifts to that fund range from $25 to $500,000. So, you don't have to be at that $500,000 level to make a difference and to participate. So people are contributing and people are sharing notes about their experience in schools, their favorite teacher, their parent that was a teacher, honoring them with a gift. How we can harness that love that we all have for public education is what's going to carry us forward.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Marty and Elaine said. I feel like, on a very small level for what we are doing, a lot of confusion. Obviously, y'all very invested in education or you wouldn't be here. But there's a lot of confusion in the community, no matter how many articles are written or if you get the community updates from Category Weekly, which are very thorough and great. But I've had the opportunity of hearing her speak many, many times, but not everybody else has. So I've tried to take what I've learned and then pass among, our constituency and then further, friends, family, and the community. I think that's very important, just to help assure people about what really happened with the money and what we're doing. And two quick things about that. I feel that everyone, yes, has been angry, but I think hopefully has felt like maybe a bit of the responsibility, because we do vote on the board members for the school board. We all can attend board meetings, and we don't pay attention enough. So I think a lot of this, as Lane said, has brought some things to light that hopefully will stay in the light and everybody will stay involved. And then just finally, what I've heard from folks who've participated so far in our efforts, what I have really loved seeing is folks from a street in town that I might know in a certain zip code, and they are purchasing books from a school over here on this part of town. They're not purchasing books for the school that's right next to them. And that has just really warmed my heart, you know, people recognizing there's a lot of need in other places. And I have some money to give, where should I give? And when I've reached out to those folks to thank them, you know, the responses of, I want every child to succeed. You know, I remember my encounter with a book in a school library as a child and how much that changed me. I want another kid to have that experience. And that's what I think is really good to hear from anybody in the community.
I think I want to combine the next question with two angles at the same time. So as you've been raising money, especially the part that goes toward the debt, you have probably heard a variety of criticisms or concerns about the money and why to do it and so forth and how to do it. But I hope you've also heard some positive stories. So I wonder if you could share both some of the concerns that have come to the surface that haven't yet been addressed, but also if you've been hearing positives, or if you've been hearing a wish list, or talk about strategic planning, a vision for what could be different. Would you share that with us?
I have not been involved in raising money for the debt. So I'm gonna tell you that right now. But I will tell you that, you know, as far as our involvement and from what we have heard and some positive impact, I think just knowing that there's a tangible way for everyone to participate has been really important to me as a small organization and as a person who can't make a $500,000 gift. That would be lovely if I could. You know, but having a way, our project really has been, I think, an equitable way for anyone to get involved, because we are passing along all of our discounts that we receive from the publishers to folks through the wish list. So you're not buying them at retail price. We're not making money off of this. We're talked to my executive board last night. We're losing a bit of money, but it's okay. You know, because it's for good cause. But you know, so a $20 book, you know, is now $8, and you can also just donate $5 to it that we will put towards the school that has the most need. So I think through that and also through volunteer efforts that we have, I think there's a chance to have, and I think probably your question is leaning more towards that equity piece and concerns around how is this an equitable way to support the schools. That is how we are addressing it, and equity is very important to us, especially around access to books and book ownership in the community. So figuring out a way to determine the schools with the most need and addressing those needs is one of our priorities.
Yeah, that is something that we've heard as well, is how are we ensuring that the funds are being distributed equitably? How are we ensuring that all of our students have access to the support that's coming from across the community? And, you know, for the fund, the Student Success Fund, we are supporting the schools and what the school system is expressing as their needs. And it would be distributed, like they are determining, we're trusting the school system to determine. I mean, a lot of them are centralized admin needs, like the volunteer background checks, and that's going to be distributed to the students or to the schools where people are showing up to volunteer. So that's one example. But I think long term, there could be work just as a community for us to think about what does it mean to ensure that we have equity in education. It's definitely a priority of the foundation. We believe that equity is what is the foundation of community change, and so we are working to ensure that the funds are distributed equitably. I'm trying to think of a success story, an exciting story. I think the stories that I shared earlier that resonates most is coming from the donors at this point, and in terms of how much it's meant for them to be able to support public schools at this time.
So obviously the Education Foundation at this point, I always tell people it feels like an emergency relief fund. You know, we really wanted to help with supplies. I think long-term, as we look at what our vision will be to enhance and enrich the public school experience and outcomes. Equity is going to be a huge part of that conversation as we get feedback from the community. Obviously, the disparities and outcomes among our schools is going to be important as we figure out the best ways to step in. In this particular moment, you know, we have been working to get the supply dollars, which it's owed to all of the schools. It's a baseline of what they were all supposed to receive and have not received to this point. This is, I think, the good news is we will start distributing that money after Thanksgiving. I somehow am going to deliver 81 checks. I'm very thankful for my board stepping up and helping us deliver checks directly to the schools. So the way the 1.4 was calculated is $1.2 million will be calculated on a per pupil basis. So that will be the amount, is the per pupil amount. It will go to all 81 schools. The $200,000 is part of printing costs. And as I understand it, and Karen, you're shaking your head, so you might be able to get this for me, but schools, if they go over their print allotment, which is apparently pretty high, they owe like a penny per. So that's the 200 will help cover some printing costs. But we are really excited to start to get that money in the hands of the schools. It is definitely going to be all out the door before winter break. We're just working on the timing of it, and we have to transfer. There's some delays that come with transferring the money from them to our bank account, to our investment accounts until we get the checks drawn. But we're just so excited and grateful to the community that stepped up. I mean, and we have the same, like we have obviously the large gift from the Brenners got us started, but we also have gifts from $5 all the way up, and every gift makes a difference. And once we get past this moment in time, I think you'll probably hear from us that we will still be raising a supplies fund every year. We have new teachers each year who we want to be able to then, you know, give them brand new supplies. We have teachers who always have supply needs, so I suspect that might strategically stay part of the work that we do, while there will be some other things that we do that will be more innovative or wraparound services for schools. I mean, I'm excited. Actually, I don't know if we have any other educators in here besides Karen, but I'm going to the principals meeting on the 10th, so I'm really looking forward to hearing directly from the principals, answer their questions, find out their concerns, find out what their additional needs are, because we can maybe step up and try to do that in the new year.
Yeah, I'll get to my
Take your time.
your questions. And I know you know this, Marty, but for the time being in this crisis per pupil, like that's a way to work it out. But we also all understand that kind of equality doesn't equal equity. And so we are thinking ahead, okay, so what does that mean for the additional support? I didn't drop my public school cred. My son is a student at Atkins, go Camels. And yes, nurtured all the way.
Yes.
But I also know that his school is compared to others very well resourced. Very well resourced. And yes, we participate and contribute to the PTA, but I also know this personally, I'm looking to other schools to help support as well. So I think kind of as a community member, kind of thinking through where your priorities and values lie. And if you want to see equity in our schools, think about like, okay, what are those schools that aren't getting the support that an Atkins gets? And that will go a long way in the future.
Okay, so we're about to leave some of these questions you knew ahead of time. So I'm thinking about a couple of things that can get lost in the midst of a crisis. Our previous superintendent was laser focused on making sure we improved reading levels, making sure that teachers got the support they need and the professional development they need to push that needle forward. She was quick to say, it happened on my watch, I'll take responsibility, but I wasn't focusing on finances, I was focusing on students and teachers. we don't want to lose that focus, even as we have learned the hard lesson is you got to simultaneously focus on your administration and make sure that the gaps are filled there. So that's number one. How do we make sure that we stay focused on achieving forward motion on achievement of schools, of students? Second question that kind of goes along with that is that there's another effort that maybe people don't even know was going on, but has been derailed by this. We were finally beginning and had gotten a grant for our school system to really re-examine the question of school district lines. And there had been a lot of meetings around the community to talk about that because that is such a fraught and politically hot button issue. How do we redraw those lines? But we know equity requires taking a look at that. Even as the school board has made the hard decision to close at least one school, then you have to look at, we have schools that have too few students. We have schools that have trailers all over the wazoo because they have too many students. That requires redrawing lines. So I want to know if you heard people talking about how do we stay focused on student achievement and how do we again go back to that thing we just shoved under the bed when the crisis happened about redrawing lines. Are you hearing anything?
I don't think we have enough time, Dean. Especially, we don't have enough time for my opinions on those. I'm just like, what's actually happening? What I want to say about that, all jokes aside, there are a lot of folks in this room who are involved in a lot of systems change, coalition building work, that Elaine, referenced a little bit about how everyone can get involved in that work. And I think it is my understanding that the redistricting is still very much on the table and has to be done. We're however many years overdue on that. I don't know if somebody knows the number, but it's a lot. And out of date, right? There's always going to be a crisis. The literacy crisis hasn't gone away because of Tricia's efforts to improve our numbers, which they did improve very slightly. It takes a lot of money, but it also takes a lot of us, a lot of our involvement, a lot of our care, a lot of our focus on it. We're part of the Forsyth County for Grade Level Reading Coalition. That involves a lot of folks in this room as well. That is being backboned by Love Literacy, and Forsyth Futures is doing a lot of the work as well. And I just want to say, as far as your point of not losing focus around literacy, which is what we care about the most, because if I'm sure I've spoken at this before and talked about third grade reading scores and how we measure so much in this country and so much of a child's potential by their third grade reading scores. We build prisons by those third grade reading scores, and ours are terrible here in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools. So I don't think that's going away. There are a lot of people and a lot of groups focused on making sure literacy remains a priority. That's not going to go away. I think as long as there are these groups, these coalitions who care about equity in our schools, care about making sure that that we are doing everything that we can do from a community standpoint to invest in our schools, I think that neither of those things are going to disappear. And I'll just reiterate what Mo Green said when he was here, that public schools, we have to get rid of the public schools are failing. We have to get rid of this negative response anytime someone brings up this budget crisis or the literacy crisis or the failing of the public schools. We have failed our public schools. We have failed our children. We have failed our teachers. We have failed our schools. So until we really rally behind that and get involved personally, then I don't think things will really make a significant change.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that's good. So I was just reflecting, Jamie mentioned the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which is a cross-sector collaborative of multiple organizations, including faith communities. And I remember in one of those meetings that the Campaign for Great Reading held, there were a couple of faith leaders there who had recently met with the chief of police and was asking the chief of police, what can we do to address youth violence? And the chief said, could you teach our kids to read? You know, like what can we do to boost our literacy and really introduce that love of reading early in life? So I just share that to convey that there are a lot of people across the community, some of them maybe kind of you wouldn't suspect thinking about literacy, who recognize that that needs to be a priority for our community.
I'm gonna ditto what both the women next to me just said, and yesterday I see my secretary from my board is in the back there. We had the opportunity to meet with Caddy Moore, and the issue of redrawing the lines came up, and I thought it was really interesting listening to her perspective, and I think this presents another challenge for our community. Certainly from the Education Foundation's perspective, we are cheerleaders for public schools. Regardless of this crisis, when we're on the other side of it, we are all in for our schools. Our board members have sent their kids to the public schools. We know that this is the bedrock of our community. It's about workforce development. It's about economic development. It's about social mobility for our community, which is the worst in the country. If you've ever seen the Ryan Chetty report, our economic mobility is the worst. Our public schools are an answer to that if we can strengthen them. But it was interesting hearing Caddy's perspective, and there's so much more that I'd have to learn. I don't really know. But what she said, which I thought was fascinating, is first of all, and I didn't know this, 35 of our 81 schools are under-enrolled. That presents a financial challenge. 10 to 12 of our schools are over-enrolled. Also presents a pretty significant financial challenge because now you're impacting a building's ability to stay a good facility in the long term because it just gets used harder. I'm thinking of being the mom of 3 boys and what they've done to my houses over the years, and that makes complete sense to me. And what she talked about was redistricting. I will say, as someone from New Jersey, who, you know, every little town has its own school system, I don't come to this with the history of busing and everything that happened in the South to desegregate our schools. And obviously we can't forget our history as we try to have these conversations. And I know it's a painful history for people who had gone through it. And it continues to have caused harm in our communities. But she shared that there are 4 factors that are part of this conversation around redistricting. It's diversity, feeder patterns, efficiency in transportation. Oh my goodness, do you remember the 4th one? That's the 4th one. There's 4, I'm missing one. Efficiency, transportation. No, that's the feeder pattern. No, that's efficiency with transportation. I'm missing one. There is a 4th factor, but all of this plays into the future of our schools and the financial well-being of our schools. We hopefully will have a bond initiative in 2028. I think, I don't know, it's hard to have a bond without a plan. And with all of that, there's declining enrollment because there's a declining birth rate. So in addition to our public schools facing competition, we also have fewer kids being born and coming to public schools. So there are a lot of probably uncomfortable conversations that we'll be having as a community over the next couple of years. But certainly from the Education Foundation's perspective, we want to be at the table where appropriate. We want to help facilitate. And at the end of the day, our goal is strengthening our public schools and strengthening the support of our public schools.
You all have touched either directly or indirectly on most of the questions we had sent you. I'm going to try an experiment in a minute. because Mo Green was here and he said, we have to stop talking about our schools in a failure perspective. We've got to start sharing better news about it. And we all have good stories. We probably also have a few horror stories. So I had 4 children that went through the public schools of Winston-Salem. Okay? Along the way, we had a couple of bumps. I had to ask for 1 teacher change. All those years, all 4 of them went all the way through. I asked for 1 teacher change. Mr. Deaton was so good about that. This was my musician son who could have cared less about geometry and wasn't doing very well. But I also knew that the teacher who'd been really good, my first 2 children, wasn't the kind of teacher that he needed. And when I went to see the principal say, for the first time ever, I'm asking for a teacher change. There's a lot that went into that. I won't go into all that. He sort of leaned back. He said, oh yeah, your first one did so-and-so. You're saying, my first child graduated from Duke and my second child graduated from Carolina. We were so glad when our 3rd child graduated from high school. You got your teacher changed. And the kid went from a D to 6 weeks later, a B with a different teacher. So sometimes parents have to say, yeah, this one isn't working. But we all have great stories. So my 4 kids, I said, went through. One of them was Phi Beta Kappa at Davidson. She wasn't that because of just who she was or where she came from. She was that because she'd gotten a good education in these schools. My second one finished state with an engineering degree. Again, he had a choice of going to several schools, but he had a solid education here. The 3rd one I just mentioned aced music theory as an AP course, went on to go to the School of the Arts, and he is still doing arrangements for symphonies and has had a lifelong career in music because of the start he got, both in public schools and in public university. My 4th one also finished, a grandson finished here. They all have done well. So I want you for a minute, raise your hand if you have a positive story to share. Something one of your children experienced in our public schools. What's one story? Yes.
I mean, my kids are still in touch. Each one of them is still in touch with teachers.
Okay, staying in touch with a teacher because that teacher changed their life.
Absolutely.
Somebody else, I started to see a hand. Yes.
My son he did Brunson Haynes Atkins and is sitting in his mechanical engineering interview and they ask him if they know CAD and Reddit. And he said, I've been doing that since middle school.
All right, so already was doing something that he was being asked to do. He'd already been doing because the schools required it. Somebody else, a good story, one story. As you're thinking, whether you share today or not, go home and think of a good story you'll start sharing with somebody. Because we gotta quit talking about what's broken. It's easy to talk about because we're human beings. Our teachers are human beings. Our principals are human beings. The people who balance the books are human beings. But there are plenty of good stories that we need to be sharing. So before I say anything else, questions you want to ask these people, we're almost out of time. You have one here. Yeah.
About the business community. Can you tell us a little bit about the business community's response so far?
How has the business community responded to this crisis?
I'm not sure. I think they could, I think they could do more. I'm so thankful for the ones who have stepped up. I'm very thankful for it. I'm thankful for Mark Owen's support and Greater Winston-Salem Inc. But I think some of the businesses are still waiting on the sidelines, and I would love to see more of them get involved.
I think we need to quickly add that Mark Owen and those folks with the chamber immediately recognized that this crisis was hurting us from an economic standpoint, that businesses were threatening to move out of Forsyth County because they were worried about being able to attract employees, that the school systems were viewed as not functioning well. There were people that themselves were not going to take a job here because of it. So this has economic implications beyond just whether our students are going to succeed. It's also about whether our community will succeed. Another question? Yes.
And Marnie's being very diplomatic because she has to be, so I'll be anger translator over here, saying that the business community has not done a good job of stepping up. And I think this is to my point, it can't be all the literacy organizations in town and folks concerned with good pre-K in town working on the solution. That's what's gotten us here, is when we're siloed working in the field that we're working in. Everybody has to have an investment in our public schools. Everyone has to care. Individuals have to care. Businesses have to care. Our banks have to care. Our hospitals have to care. It is going to take the whole community, and the business community really needs to step up in this moment.
I'm not quite sure where we are now, but a couple of weeks ago, I asked Patty Moore, so how is your finance department now? Do you have what you need so we won't have a problem again? She said, I do not have a CFO. I do not have the second in command in that department. And I do not have a person, I've forgotten whether it was payroll, something else important. And so one of my questions of the business community is, what about loaned executives? So what about somebody that can begin to recruit a really top-notch CFO who understands school finance, which is different than corporate finance, okay? So pass the word, they're looking for positions, try to attract people. Ask the question.
I had a question, and maybe Winston-Salem Foundation can answer it. When I was still working in the school system about 7 years ago, Dr. Emery formed this coalition with businesses. I don't know if you all remember, which makes me wonder if our business community is a little hesitant because they went all in on this reading initiative that we had for 3 years, and we got tons of money from the Winston-Salem business community. We had all kinds of professional development. They bought books. I mean, it was millions of dollars. Woody Kleiner chunked his big piece in, Don Flo, and the Winston-Salem Foundation had a huge role in that at the time. But do you know what eventually happened with that? And I'm wondering if our business community is a little sensitive because previously.
Talk about project impact.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll try to answer a little bit about that. And I do think, unfortunately, there were some hurt feelings towards the end of that initiative. I think some of it was related to, we had COVID in the middle of what was trying to be accomplished. And unfortunately, we also had a lot of turnover. Reynolds American was a huge originating sponsor with Andrew Gilchrist, who was the corporate champion, and then they were bought and sold, and he left town. And I think there was a great investment and great excitement about it, but I think unfortunately it also maybe broke some trust. But my response to the business community would be, we didn't get where we are overnight. And we may have to fail and fail again, but we have to keep trying. I keep thinking to some of us just saw this video about this community in Florida, and they're calling their reading thing, they're calling their third grade reading thing the Moonshot Initiative. Because, some of us were old. I was not there, but I was not old enough. But President Kennedy, when he said, we're going to go, I heard my parents talk about it. We're going to go to the moon, and people thought he was crazy. And sometimes really hard things, you don't get it right the first time, but we owe it to our children to figure it out. And I hope that they will come around, because their workforce of tomorrow is sitting in our classrooms right now. And we all need to be all in for our school. That's a great place to go.
Okay, a couple of other things I will say. We haven't said much about the faith community. We call this Faith in the City because we believe that whatever your faith is, whatever your central core values are, that those values should lead you to be engaged in your community and trying to make a difference. Now, we are Baptist, I didn't grow up Baptist, I grew up Methodist, but I married a Baptist preacher's son, and became a Baptist. And one of the things I respect about Baptists is very much that emphasis on separation of church and state, on the autonomy of the individual church and the individual believer. Separation does not mean non-involvement. So we have found at Knollwood that we've been able to form a really solid, in-depth partnership that people here could tell you more about with Bolton Elementary School, as one was close. So has the Temple, for example, with Moore. And so be aware, wherever your community of faith is, there are opportunities without negating separation of church and state for your faith community to say, how can we be involved? And I want to leave you with 3 challenges and a good news, okay? I would like to, we've really got to change the narrative. So be practicing looking for those positive stories. Number 2, we've got to start, this is not just about schools. We are in a mess in this country because we're not knowledgeable enough to choose genuine servant leaders when we go to the polls. Somehow we got to get back to that, beginning on the local level, but beyond that. Thirdly, we got to learn how to be intelligent advocates. So please reach out to your legislators in the General Assembly. I think we're not going to get rid of vouchers, I don't think. But I think we could say if a school receives vouchers, it should have to meet the standards that public schools do, at the very least. So I'm going to the legislature and say that. And at the same time, they need to up their per diem, per student funding of public schools. The last thing I want to say is that I have some good news. Our next Faith in the City, which will be the 2nd Tuesday in December, the 9th, instead of the 1st, because of immediate return from Thanksgiving, is going to be our new superintendent.
Oh, yeah.
Don Phipps will be here, and we're going to press him about his vision and how he's going to, and Mo Green combined realism and honesty with optimism and hope. I want to hear Dr. Phipps do that. I want to hear him talk about, this is where we are right now, but this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. So come prepared to ask hard questions and to challenge him and to welcome him and make him feel good about being in part of this community. This may be because he'll be at work 1 week or less when he comes. So it might be his very first public forum. So grab your seatbelts and bring some people along and come on December the 9th. Thank you. Can we thank these folks?